Title: The Hall of the Hunkers. Year: 91,250,000. Era: Age of Tempests. Author: Jeremy Levan. And Rise of the Zodiac Series 2025. Chapter 1. The name that refuses could not be forgotten, though many try it. Every time someone buried her memory, it whispered louder in their dreams. She arrived in the carved capital of Mithros as a healer. Though she carried no potions, only truths, there she met the thorn-eyed pilgrim, whose gaze could pierce delusion, but at the cost of seeing beauty as pain. He walked with thorns in his eyes and silence in his mouth. "What do you seek?" she asked. "Peace," he said. She nodded, then asked again louder. "And what do you need?" He staggered, because pain dodged becomes suffering recycled, and the thorns began to tremble. Chapter 2. They walked the city's underlayers, tunnels lined with grief that had never been voiced. The pilgrim began to see colors again, red as grief, blue as quiet shame. The refuser led him to the House of Mirrors, where citizens shouted their pride and buried their sorrow. There, she shattered the glass, and behind it were children, still waiting to be heard. "Why break what holds them?" he asked. "Because they are not held, they are trapped." Word spread, not of a riot, of release. People began to gather, not in squares, but in circles, and the thorns in his eyes softened. Chapter 3. The pilgrim spoke, his first full sentence in a decade. "I am tired of hurting in silence." And the crowd echoed. The name that refuses placed her hands on the earth, and the city trembled, not in fear, in awakening. The council begged for quiet, but the people asked for listening, and for the first time, Mistros held its breath, then exhaled. The pilgrim became a teacher. The refuser, a myth that grew into method, and when pain surfaced again, as it always does, they no longer turned away. They turned toward, together, because healing is not the end, it is the courage to begin with honesty. Title: The Light in Quiet Deeds. Year: 91,133,146.15. Era: Age of Tempests. Author: Jeremy Levan. And Rise of the Zodiac Series 2025. Chapter 1. The Stone. Blood was not born of royalty or prophecy. She was born in the cracks of crumbling cities, where kindness was currency too rarely spent. She carved roads from ruins and brewed tea for beggars and kings alike. Her strength came not from power, but from consistency. In the temple ruins of Olmenith, she met the keeper of forgotten race, a man with a scroll in one hand and a funeral bell in the other. "Why do you remember the dead?" she asked. "Because someone must," he replied. And in that shared duty, they built a friendship stitched with silence. Because what you envy is a mirror of what you once abandoned, and both of them had once abandoned peace. Chapter 2. A drought struck Willows. The high houses hoarded water. The stone, blood-offered wells dug by hand, lined with memory. The keeper read rice over cracked earth. Blessing seeds never promised rain. They asked for nothing, received even less. But a child brought a loaf of bread. A farmer left figs on their doorstep. A baker sang her family's lost song. The ripple spread, quiet, stubborn, hopeful. And while rulers made declarations, the people made dinners. For each other, with each other. And the keeper whispered, "This is the right they forgot." She smiled and dug deeper. Chapter 3. Years later, when the palace fell to its own thirst, the lowlands flourished. No banners flew, no statues were raised, but every home had a bench outside, and every traveler found rest. The keeper rang his bell once more, not for death, for gratitude. The stone blood remained unnamed in history books, but generations remembered her wells, her tea, her silence, because small acts of kindness don't echo in fame. They echo in habits and legacies, and in the quiet miracles of people who no longer wait to be saved. They save each other. Title: The Sound Before the Shout. Year: 91,057,692.31. Era: Age of Tempests. Author: Jeremy Levan. And Rise of the Zodiac Series 2025. Chapter 1. A blade with a past kept her weapon wrapped in linen, worn thin by years of restraint. She didn't brandish it not because she feared violence, but because she respected silence. The wind-worn stranger came into town with no luggage but a scar across his throat and a reputation that walked ahead of him. They met in a crowded square, mid-mutiny, where the mayor was dragged from his home for siding with the voiceless. "No one else will speak," the stranger rasped. "I don't need them to," said the blade, and she stepped between the mob and their justice. Because a clear silence is not still, it is thunder choosing its moment. Chapter 2. The mob dispersed, not because they were wrong, but because someone finally stood. The blade didn't offer speeches, she offered presence. She walked with the mayor unarmed, unflinching through the village that cursed him. The stranger shadowed her path. They heard windows shut, and then they heard one open. A child's voice. I think they're right, but I'm glad they didn't kill him. It was enough. Later that night, she found the stranger sharpening his silence. You believe in what we did? She asked. I believe in what it stopped. And they waited. Not for applause, for change. Chapter 3. Whispers began to shift. People questioned their rage. Some even questioned the reasons. They never questioned anything at all. The mayor left quietly, but not alone. The stranger escorted him beyond the cliffs. The blade remained, not to lead, to remind. And whenever conflict rose again, her blade stayed wrapped. But her voice, that deeper, because standing up for others doesn't always mean loud defiance. Sometimes it means being the silence that swallows a scream before it becomes the wound. And when thunder rolls over Windrest, they say, it's her, listening first. Title: The Pages Between Us. Year: 90,961,538.46. Era: Age of Tempests. Author: Jeremy Levan and Rise of the Zodiac Series 2025. Chapter 1. The Scribe of Vanishing Things inked his scrolls with memories no one dared claim. Wars ended, friendships broken, promises shattered. He wrote them all and tucked them away in the wind. He believed stories should fade to make room for peace, until he met the Shield maiden who believed the opposite. She wore armor forged from histories, each dent a conversation, each scar a boundary redrawn. They met in the cradlelands, where two tribes refused to speak. A right to forget, he said. A fight to remember, she replied. They didn't agree, but they listened, because to start over it isn't weakness. It's the wisdom to try again with fire in hand. Chapter 2. They hosted a feast between the borders. One tribe brought silence, the other suspicion. The scribe told the story of a child who had once united them. The Shield maiden handed out pieces of her armor, each one etched with old grievances. Together, they burned the pieces. Together, they rewrote the tale. A new anthem rose, not of victory, of presence. Hands that once clenched now planted seeds, feet that marched now danced. And the scribe, for the first time, wrote with hope. And the Shield maiden set down her blade. Chapter 3. The cradlelands became a sanctuary, a place where stories crossed like rivers and walls gave way to gates. The scribe founded a library, where memory could be shared, not hoarded. The Shield maiden trained guardians to protect peace, not pride. And when asked if they were lovers, friends, or rivals, they answered, yes, because love is not always tender. Sometimes it is forged in disagreement, but made sacred in choosing to stay, understand, and in the middle of every fire, to write new beginnings. Together. Title: The Fire Beneath the Quiet. Year: 19,865,384.62. Era: Age of Tempests. Author: Jeremy Levan and Rise of the Zodiac Series 2025. Chapter 1. The Echo Sister never spoke above a whisper, not because she feared noise, but because her silence carried more weight than shouting ever could. She lived in the hushed city of Belreach, where even clocks ticked an apology. No one remembered the last celebration. No one remembered warmth. They only remembered the date of Halloween. Then came the flame, unfinished, neither ghost nor fire, but something broken in between. He flickered in abandoned doorways, sang lullabies to unlit candles. They met at the heart of an old cathedral, surrounded by soot. Why come here? She asked. Because stillness is not sleep, he answered. It is the unseen march of the soul. And the walls listened. Chapter 2. Belreach had rules. No singing, no touching, no open flames. The Echo Sister broke one, she hummed, and it traveled. The flame, unfinished, sparked where her breath lingered. Together, they warmed their room, then a street, then a widow's memory. Love returned in tiny forms. A shared blanket, a glance, held 1 second longer. A loaf split in silence. A love, like fire, draws shadows. Whispers turned into warnings. The keepers came, the silence, to erase. The sisters stood. The flame flared, and the cathedral once hollow roared. Chapter 3. They didn't win, but they weren't extinguished. The cathedral burned, but from the ash children drew hearts into it. The Echo Sister vanished. The flame, unfinished, became myth. Yet each winter, a candle appears in every window. No note, no instruction. Just light, because horror isn't always monsters. Sometimes it's forgetting how to care. And justice isn't a verdict. It's a choice, that again and again, by hands that remember that love and compassion are not luxuries. They are the foundation, and even in terror, they march still. Title: The Fractures That Bloom. Here: 19,769,230.77. Era: Age of Tempests. Author: Jeremy Levan and Rise of the Zodiac Series 2025. Chapter 1. The wind touched wandered into cities like a question unasked. Her thoughts arrived before her name, and her smile often made statues flinch. She was drawn to forgotten places, abandoned observatories, broken bridges, locked rooms with missing keys. At the edge of the Wayne cliffs, she found the sere, forgotten path sitting in a circle of cracked mirrors. "Are these maps?" she asked. "They were mistakes," he said. "But you kept them?" "To remember the cost of not growing. Time may heal, but its hands sometimes carve scars, and some scars become maps for others." Chapter 2. They journeyed through the hollow spires once home to the proud, now echoing with regret. The seer saw every possible misstep. The wind touch took them anyway. Each time she fell, he recorded the lesson. Each time he hesitated, she pushed forward. Together, they danced between caution and chaos. They met a village terrified of choosing. "Every decision we've made led to suffering," the elder said. "So did every silence," replied the seer. The wind touched offered a coin. "One side says move," she smiled. "What's the other?" "Move anyway." And for the first time in years, the village chose. Chapter 3. They returned to the circle of mirrors. This time, the wind touch stepped into it. The mirrors did not shatter. They sang. Each reflection carried a failure, each note a lesson. The seer cried, not because he was sad, because he understood. He wasn't cursed to remember failure. He was blessed to witness growth. The wind touch disappeared with the morning wind. Some say she became a gust that pushes doubters forward. The seer became a teacher, not a vision, of resilience. Because success is not a staircase. It's a mosaic of symbols, and only those who fall learn how to rise whole. Title: The Hustle of the Forgotten Hours. Year: 19,673,076.92. Era: Age of Tempests. Author: Jeremy Levan. And Rise of the Zodiac Series 2025. Chapter 1. The Oracle didn't predict doomward destiny. She predicted deadlines. With sticky notes. Each morning, villagers lined up for prophecies like, "Check your goats left. Hoof at noon. Don't trust the bread today. The haystack hides your sock." She was never wrong, but she was always tired. Then came the memory weaver, a man whose recollections stitched themselves into reality, often inaccurately. He claimed he'd once milked a lightning bolt. Twice, the Oracle rolled her eyes, then hired him, because even the darkest soul, night ends in light you've earned, and she'd earned a break. Chapter 2. Their operation expanded. He forgot things. She reminded him. He remembered things. She denied them. Together, they organized festivals, fixed fences, and counseled the lovesick with dramatic flair. Villagers thrived, laughed, prospered. Then came the auditor from the Central Forecast Bureau. He wore beige. He frowned at color. He asked for proof. The Oracle showed her wall of sticky notes. The weaver offered him a dream of productivity. The auditor fainted. Twice, the villagers carried him off singing, "We trust chaos more than calendars." And the Oracle smiled. Just a little. Chapter 3. Their legend spread. Other towns sent gifts, requests, marriage proposals. The Oracle ignored them. The weaver answered all of them incorrectly, but helpfully. They built a statue. It was a sticky note on a rock. It read, "Buy anyway." When asked their secret, the Oracle said, "Consistency." The weaver added, "Improvisational consistency," because hard work doesn't always look grand. Sometimes it looks like goats, mismatched socks, and schedules that hum with humanity. And results. They arrive, late, laughing, but always worth it. Title: The Ripple Conspiracy. Year: 90,576,923.08. Era: Age of Tempests. Author: Jeremy Levan. And Rise of the Zodiac Series 2025. Chapter 1. The voice beneath the veil ran a conspiracy hotline out of a booth disguised as a fortune cookie stand. Her veil shimmered with news, fruit, and nonsense, but her voice, it made even cynics pause. The time vendor, long retired from meddling with history, now taught yoga to bureaucrats. Their paths crossed when a lizard council accidentally triggered an empathy shockwave across 3 city blocks. "The compassion contagion is spreading," said the voice. "Excellent," replied the vendor. "Now maybe the tax office will hug something. Even the smallest choice sends echoes into lives far beyond your own," she said. "That includes voting for sandwich toppings," he muttered. And thus they agreed it was time to escalate. Chapter 2. They infiltrated the Council of Rational Progress with pamphlets disguised as Sudoku puzzles. One read, "Kindness is a glitch in the simulation, install it often." Another, "Empathy is emotional malware, spread it." Soon executive meetings involved group therapy circles. PowerPoints dissolved into spoken word poetry. The voice led laughter meditations in elevators. The time vendor rewound petty arguments to their hugs. "Is this sabotage?" the senator asked. "No," said the janitor. "This is progress." And the ripple grew, because people started asking not what they could do, but what they should, and the world tilted, just slightly, toward absurd grace. Chapter 3. The voice vanished mid-sentence. The time vendor blamed temporal hiccups, but rumors say she became a radio frequency you can only hear when you're about to choose kindness. The hotline remains, but it now answers with your own voice and a question. What ripple are you making today? In parks, old payphones now buzz empathy. Crosswalks recite poems, and no one knows who funds it. Because some revolutions aren't loud. They chuckle, they help, they echo. And as the time bender teaches beginners how to follow with style, he smiles. Because progress isn't paved in rules. It's puddled in laughter and empathy. It ripples forever. Title: The Ledger of the Living. Year: 90,480,769.23. Era: Age of Tempests. Author: Jeremy Levan and Rise of the Zodiac Series 2025. Chapter 1. The one-eyed truth lived inside the courthouse of just a ruin of red stone, paper-strewn and light-starved. He had no gavel, no law books, just a chair, a candle, and a scar. People came to confess things no law could judge. Then one day the archivist of regret returned. She carried scrolls bound in bone thread, filled with names of the unburied, the unatoned. "You missed me," she said. "I waited," he replied. Her scrolls hissed open, and the walls remembered screams. "Why do you stay?" she asked. "Because your existence is an act of defiance to the cages that birthed you," he said, "and mine is keeping the door open." Chapter 2. Sickness came not of body, but of memory. People forgot their oaths, their kin, their crimes. The streets grew clean. The souls did not. The one-eyed truth scratched verdicts into stone. The archivist placed them on rooftops. Rain erased none of it. Guilt returned in waves. Some wept. Others raged. The courthouse trembled, not from wrath, from recognition. She said, "They'll hate us." He replied, "Then they've seen themselves." And the doors stay open. Every name read aloud. Every name met with silence. And then a whisper, "I remember." And with it, a beginning. Chapter 3. No monuments were raised. No justice declared. But the village changed. People recorded their regrets and ledgers kept at every crossing. Children learned names of the forgotten. The one-eyed truth vanished. The archivist remained bolder, lighter. When asked what they were doing, she said, "Making cages unnecessary. Because horror isn't only in monsters. It's in forgetting what you owe to others, to yourself. And personal responsibility isn't punishment. It's participation in progress, in healing, in never again, and in always." Now, title: The Reflection of Ash and Echo. Year: 90,384,615.38. Era: Age of Tempests. Author: Jeremy Levan and Rise of the Zodiac Series 2025. Chapter 1. The Laughing Ash earned her name when she tackled at the pyre of an empire not out of cruelty, but because she'd warned them and been mocked. The fire did not consume her. It clarified her. She walked now with soot in her steps and stories in her breath. The ghost in every cycle haunted libraries, not in death but as a flicker of forgotten memory. Every time history prepared to repeat, he appeared beside someone holding a match. In the ruins of Durlin, they met. "Back again?" he asked. "You too," she replied. They looked into a shard of mirror. "Mirrors don't show who you are," she said. "They show who you're brave enough to see." And the glass burned blue. Chapter 2. Together, they followed echoes of rising seal rallies cloaked in nostalgia, leaders draped in recycled thunder. The ash told tales at taverns. The ghost whispered facts into dreams. They were ignored and remembered. Too late. The city fell, but a child hid one of the ash's poems beneath his pillow and recited it to survivors. The ghost appeared. "You're not supposed to know me," he said. "But I do," the child replied. "You're the page between chapters." Hope crept through alleyways. Questions bloomed in speeches, and monuments to ignorance cracked. Because when history repeats, it leaves fingerprints, and sometimes a trail. Chapter 3. They didn't stop the next war, but they slowed it with laughter and memory. The laughing ash burned books only after memorizing them. The ghost etched names onto walls, and when people asked who started the movement, no one answered, because it wasn't one voice. It was many, echoed, remembered, carried. A mirror was placed in every home, etched with a question. "Are you listening now?" And beneath that, a spark, not a flame, a awareness. Because the bravest act isn't to face history, it's to stop pretending it isn't you. Title: The Pivot of Small Things. Year: 19,288,461.54. Era: Age of Tempests. Author: Jeremy Levan and Rise of the Zodiac Series 2025. Chapter 1. The mirror without mercy didn't show reflections, it showed consequences. They stood in the center of the village square, surrounded by flowers no one dared to pick, and a silence too intentional to be accidental. People visited it in secret. They never returned the same. Then came the architect of breath, the stranger who carried a notebook filled with questions and shoes made of reeds. He asked, "Why do you all look away?" As it doesn't lie, someone whispered. He stepped in front of the mirror. It showed him a feather burning, and he smiled. Faith walks clearest where certainty dissolves. And then he began to draw. Chapter 2. He didn't build walls. He planted doorways, each open to nothing, yet people stepped through, and on the other side they acted effortlessly. A widow sang, a blacksmith listened, a child forgave. The mirror grew quiet, less cruel, more curious. The architect sat beside it each evening. He spoke to it like a friend. What do you want to become? He asked. It shimmered, and one night it showed him a village without it. He nodded, because small changes in our mindset lead to shifts in the soul, and from there, the world. Chapter 3. The mirror vanished. No one saw it leave, but every window began to shimmer faintly, and the architect moved on, leaving behind no blueprint, just habits. People left chairs outside for others. They paused before speaking. They asked new questions, and in their homes, reflections no longer punished. They provoked. They inspired. And when travelers asked what miracle had occurred, the villagers said, "We learned to look, because revolution isn't always thunder. Sometimes it's a whisper, heard clearly for the first time, and it echoes in choices made small, lived large." Title: The Thread of Unspoken Light. Year: 90,192,307.69. Era: Age of Tempest. Author: Jeremy Levan and Rise of the Zodiac, Series 2025. Chapter 1. The weaver of moons threaded starshine into stories, stitching light across the night sky, so forgotten names could glow again. Her hands bore scars not from needles, but from choices. One of those choices was the teacher who forgets nothing. He remembered every wound, every betrayal, every plea ignored. They met in a city built on secret, etched not in stone, but in silence. "We're unraveling," she said. "We always were," he replied. "So what do we do?" "When fixing breaks you further, stop," he said, "and let it break open." She nodded, and they prepared, not to mend, but to transform. Chapter 2. The stars began to dim, not from failure, from forgetting. The teacher gathered orphans of memory, those who bore the cost of others' comfort. The weaver unspooled her final thread. Together they created a ritual, not of resurrection, of remembrance. Each strand held a sacrifice, a truth denied, a love left behind. But as they wove, the city cracked, not in destruction, an awakening. People gathered confused. "What are you doing?" they asked. "Ending the silence," said the weaver, "and becoming its song," added the teacher, and the stars shivered in response. Chapter 3. It finished the tapestry. The weaver stepped into it, disappeared, and the teacher. He remembered her, and everything she gave. The city changed, not because she lived, but because she left. Her sacrifice echoed in lullabies, in protests, in poetry. The stars burned brighter, not in vengeance, in gratitude. A monument was never built. Instead, children lay under the stars and whispered her name. And when asked why she gave everything, the teacher only said she knew what silence could not bear. Because the greater good is not a path, it is a thread. And sometimes you must become the needle. Title: The Measure of Wildness. Year: 90,096,153.85. Era: Age of Tempests. Author: Jeremy Levan and Rise of the Zodiac, Series 2025. Chapter 1. The Beast Whisperer rode into the city of Telerian with no banners and a wolf at her side. The guards hesitated. She stared. They parted. Inside, a trial was underway. The banished prince stood accused of endangering the realm by consorting with rebels, poets, dreamers, and midwives with no allegiance to the crown. "I gave them courage," he said. "You gave them chaos," the judge replied. But the beast whisperer stepped forward. "Safety stunts the soul," she said. "Wildness waters it." She offered no credentials, only truth, and the room fell still, because progress doesn't knock. It bares its teeth. Chapter 2. They weren't executed. They were exiled, together, beyond the warden wall, a place of storms and relics, of rules forgotten and myths that still bite. They didn't run. They built. A school for risk, not recklessness. Forged for wild ideas, not destruction. And people came, one by one, with broken laws in their pockets and seeds of courage between their ribs. They learned to speak wolf, to track fear, to calculate danger and court it with care. And the exiles thrived, not despite the wilderness, because of it. Chapter 3. Years passed. Telerian fell to its own inertia. The exile colony. It flew, literally. Kites became gliders. Gliders became skyships. And when the city begged for help, the banished prince returned. Not with vengeance, with schematics. And the beast whisperer brought her pack, because taking calculated risks isn't abandoning caution. It's honoring what could be over what merely is. And when asked how they survived, the prince said, "We didn't. We evolved, because wildness isn't chaos. It's the soil of something better."